Welcome to RickRackRuby. I'm Laura Cluvo. I was recently checking out the dollar spot in Target and they had their Valentine display. I could not resist picking up the kitchen towels and creating a handbag from them. My first one turned out like this, but today I'll be demonstrating this one. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. The dollar spot at Target has at least 2 sets of Valentine's Day towels, kitchen towels. This one, You Are My Favorite, paired with this floral scatter print I've already made. And then this one, I Love You, with this I Love You scatter print we will make today. I also have some red rickrack. This is from Hobby Lobby. Red gingham lining fabric. You can use whatever you like for lining fabric. I got this at Hobby Lobby. And then I've already made these patterns, which I'll describe for you. This one is for the flap. I made it from a 3x5 index card, folded it in half and rounded the edge. And I believe I just used this ribbon roll to determine the edge there. Easy. I cut 2 flap pieces from this Pellon 50 weight sew-in interfacing. For the pocket inside, I'll show you. Here's the pocket. I used a 4x6 index card. So I use that to cut 2 pieces of the lining fabric for the pocket. Then for the actual bag, the pattern is 12 inches tall and 11 inches wide. Then I folded it in half lengthwise. And then I tapered it a little bit. I came in 3/4 of an inch from the edge here on the top. And then I drew a line out to the bottom corner and cut that off at a slight angle. It's only 3/4 of an inch at the top. So here's the top, 3/4 of an inch in from the original 11-inch wide width at the top. I drew a line, folded it in half, and cut it. Then I cut 4 pieces of the Pellon 50 weight sew-in interfacing. And we are ready to start. The first thing I'll do is to, of course, remove the tag. And then I'm going to press these to get all the folds out. And I'm just going to cut off and remove these hems. The bottom of this one has a cute heart-shaped trim, so I think I will remove that with my seam ripper and save it, maybe for this project or maybe for another project. So I'll press, remove all the hems, and remove the trim, and I'll do the same for this. I noticed that this I Love You is not exactly a scatter print like my floral because it is directional. I'll have to make sure that I keep the print, the writing, right side up. One thing that I've discovered about these towels is that they're rarely square. But before you square them up, measure. You'll need at least 14.5 inches across to make this project. This is 14.5 right here, so I have 14 3/4, so I'll be fine. But if you find that you're a little short, then your handle can be narrower. I've cut a 3.5 inch strip from one edge, long edge, of the printed towel. This is going to be the strap or the handle. I'm going to fold and press it the long way, and then fold and press each edge in like this, and then pin it and top stitch down both long sides. I'll be right back. Here's how the strap looks before I top stitch it. It's folded and pinned, and now I will top stitch down each long edge with white. Here's my strap, top stitched, and now I'm going to put some red thread in my machine while I leave the white thread in the bobbin, and I'm going to sew this rickrack right down the center. You don't have to use rickrack. You can just leave it plain, or you can use another trim. But of course, I will use rickrack. Now I'm going to add the rickrack down the center of the handle. I'm not going to pin it or glue it or anything. I'm just going to kind of guide it as I go. I'm going to use red thread in the top and white thread in the bobbin. And there's the handle completed, nice and clean, straight down the center. On the back, I've got an extra line of stitching. Turned out great. Now let's start the pocket. I've used this index card to cut out 2 pieces of fabric for my pocket, which I will pin right sides together, stitch all the way around the edge, leaving an opening at the bottom for turning. Then I've also prepared the main lining pieces. This is my 50 weight interfacing, and I will stitch a small, maybe about with a less than 1/4 of an inch allowance all the way around the edge and trim those. 2 of these for the lining plus the pocket. Here are my 2 lining pieces, ready to go. I've applied the sew-in interfacing to the back of each, and here's my pocket. I left an opening at the bottom. I'll turn this right side out. I trim the corners. I'll turn it right side out. I'll press it, top stitch the top edge, and then I'll pin it to one of these. Then I'll pin it up here and sew. And then I'll center the pocket about an inch or 2 down from the top edge. Remember, the top is the narrower edge. And I'll stitch this around these 3 sides, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Here I've sewn the pocket about 1.5 inches down from the top. And now I'll sew the front lining, the back lining. I'll go down each side to the bottom and leave an opening in the center of the bottom, and then sew up the other side. This opening is going to be important to turn the bag later. My lining is sewn. There's an opening here for turning. Now I'm going to box the corners. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right term, but I'm going to trim the corners, making sure I don't cut through the seam, of course, and open up these seam allowances so that they sort of match like this. There's the side, there's the bottom. I'll pin both of these. Then on my machine, I'm just going to stitch straight across, perpendicular to my seam, about 1.5 inches, about right here. I'll do that to both corners. Then I'll trim. There's the first one, and you can see that just creates a little bag on the bottom. And now I'll repeat for this side. I've heard this called a paper bag bottom or a box corner, different things. I don't know the exact term, but it just kind of squares off the bottom corners like this, and there's still that opening for turning. Now I'll go and sew the front and the back of the bag to the interfacing. For the back, I'm going to use this print, and then for the front, I'm going to use the large I love you motif. This will be the front. I've sewn the interfacing to the back of the front and to the back of the back. And now I'm going to sew around the 3 sides side, bottom, side, and then I'm going to box these corners just like I did for the lining, but I don't need to leave an opening. Boom, 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 and box the corners. Now we'll talk about the flap. This was my pattern that I made from an index card, a 3x5 card. And then I cut 2 pieces of sew-in interfacing, Pellon 50, and I cut 1 from my lining fabric and 1 from the second towel. The lining is going to have the male part of the magnetic closure installed. The female part of the magnet will be installed on the outside front of the bag. So I'm folding it in half to determine the center, and then I'll measure down 2 inches right on that fold. 2 inches from the edge is right here. That looks about right. This part goes on the back or the underside. And since it's so far down, it won't interfere with any part of the sewing. So I'm going to just snip it with my little baby scissors. I'll snip those 2 little straight lines there, 1, 2. And then slide those prongs through. Put the backing on. I don't know the exact name for this, but the plate that goes on the back. And then I'm going to use my pliers to fold in those little prong parts. I get them as flat as I can. So that is ready to go. The second part of the magnetic closure will go on the lining of the tab. The tab will be here, it'll be sewn together, and it'll close like that. So this is a little bit trickier because we can't really sew it if the magnet's installed because it's too close to the seam. From the edge, I'm going to measure up 1 1/4 inches, and it's right here. And it's right in the center. I folded it first. Let's just confirm. There it is. All right. That's where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut those little slits so I'm ready to go. But I'm not going to install it until I'm done sewing it, and I'll leave this edge open. Just cut those little slots. It looks like it's fairly well centered. Make sure they go all the way through. Then later on, I'll be reaching through, and then I will install this later. But first, we need to sew it. So the first thing I'm going to do is baste some RickRack right around the edge, stitching about 1/4 inch in, and so that the edge of the RickRack just matches the edge of the piece. Here we go. I stitched the RickRack around. I put red thread in the machine. I left my bobbin white, and I made a little bit longer stitch length, and that's just in case I made a mistake. It would be easier to pick out, but I didn't. I think it looks good. So now I'm going to pin the second half and put my machine back to white thread top and bottom, and I'll follow along just inside that stitch. I've sewn around the edge and left the straight edge open. I'm going to snip a couple of places along the curve. I can tell I'm only going to have the very barest edge of the RickRack showing, and I'm okay with that. Let's just check to be sure that everything looks right. I've got Rick-Rack around the edge, so I'm good. Now I'll press it and top stitch. There we go. I top stitched with white. The top edge, the straight edge is still open. And so now I'll put in the magnetic closure. It's a little bit tricky, but not as tricky as installing it first and then trying to sew. They're on the lining side, of course. So I'm going to reach the little magnet through there and then put the back on, and then fold in the prongs. Flatten it out, then turn it back right side out. Now I'm just going to sew straight across this open edge to kind of hold that all together. Now we'll work on the final assembly. First, I just want to make sure, yep, that's going to work. I'll fold this in half to determine the center back and mark that with a pin. And then remember to sew right sides together, so the I love you side to the I love you side. And then match that center pin. And then the strap is going to be, again, right sides together, right on the seam. There's the seam. Open it up. Open up the seam allowance. And then pin this right side to right side. So when you sew it, the Rick-Rack will be on the outside. Pin both sides. Just loop that around and pin it here. Great. And then the lining, make sure your lining is inside out. And then the pocket goes to the back. I like it in the back. And then remember, you have your opening in the lining. Just make sure you have that. This way it's right sides together. Match up the side seams and pin it all the way around. I like to pin and sew from the inside with the lining on the outside. Now I'm going to sew just inside this previously stitched line. So about 3/8 of an inch in from the top all the way around. Be right back. Here we go. I've sewn all along this top edge, and now I will reach in and turn it right side out. This part is really fun. Now I'll tuck the lining down inside the bag. I want to confirm that this is going to snap just right, which it does. Then I'm going to pin and top stitch along this edge. Now I've top stitched around the edge, and I just want to remind you to go slowly. Whenever you reach the handle or the tab, you will be sewing through a lot of layers of fabric. So go nice and slow. The last step is to sew up the opening in the bottom. So I'll do that, and I'll be right back. To sew up the bottom, I just kind of pinned it together and just kind of stitched it like this. It's way, way, way down in the bottom of the lining, and I don't think anybody's going to care that it's not perfectly tucked inside and hand stitched. So then I'll just tuck the lining back inside. There's the back. It's so cute. I love you, I love you, I love you. There's the front. The magnet works fine. And it's done. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.